Welcome back to the next video in the series. Today we are going to talk about traditional for loops. There are a lot of loop types within any programming language. If you would have studied C++, Java, you would see do while, for, and while loops. Generally, and in most of the times, for loop is the most enhanced loop and it is available across all the languages. It is the most used kind of loop within an Apex code. So you want to execute block of statement for particular time. So let's say you want to print 1 to 100. So one way of printing 1 to 100 is that you write system.debug1, system.debug2, system.debug3, and 4 and 5 and so on and so forth until 100. So you write 100 lines of code just to print 1 to 100. Or what you can do is you can write 3 lines of code, write a loop. You write a for loop, say your variable value starts from 1, your loop runs until 100, and you increase your variable value each time. And then you just write a single line of statement for your system.debug and say this debug A. And this would actually print from 1 to 100 in just 3 lines of code. I'll quickly show you and then we'll come back on the points which are part of this thing because it would be easier for you to understand that way. So this is our training session 7. We'll do the same thing which we have been doing so far. Public static void method, and so for integer a is equal to 0. For the time being, just understand this is the way we are writing. I'm going to explain to you in a moment what exactly we are doing here. So a is equal to 0, a is less than equal to 100, and then we are doing a plus plus. Then we'll just write system dot debug a. And that's all that you need to write. And this will actually print 0 to 100 for you in just these 3 lines of code, nothing else. Let's execute that. So this is our training session 7. Execute. See, it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you have got it till looping back. But basically, we have got it till 100, 98, 99, and 100. Yeah. That's the power of loop if you have just observed it. Otherwise, what you would have done something like this: system.debug, and then you would do 1, and then you would do it again, and then you would do 2. How tiring that is, and how unmaintainable that piece of code is. So let's say if you want to, then you just want to print 1 to 20, and then you want to print 80 to 100. Then you can't do, you'll have to remove the rest of the code and all of that. So the smaller the code is, the easier to understand it is, the easier to maintain it is. You have just seen the power of loop, how interesting your loop could be and how it could save you from writing 100 lines of code and just converting those lines into a couple of lines. So let's understand what we did here in this for loop. The first thing is we created a variable for our loop. This variable has an initial value. So that is our initial value here. It has a data type, which is integer, and it has an initial value, which we gave as 0. Then we set that until where this loop needs to run. If we don't put this condition, then this is called an infinite loop. So if we do that, your code will get into this for loop and it will keep on running and running and running it, and it will never stop. And loops like this basically end up consuming your system capacity, and this loop will never stop because it does not have an exit condition. So what we added here is the exit condition. So when to enter in the loop with this, whenever you enter in the loop, enter with this initial value as 0. And the moment your value is 100, just exit out. Don't keep on running and don't become an infinite loop. This is the condition. Till the time this condition is true, your loop will keep running. The moment this condition turns out to be false, it will come out of the loop. It will stop the loop. And that's, your loop should always have an exit statement, which is very important. And the third part, which we have added here, This is the increment. So we are adding, like it is a plus plus, so we are adding 1 to a. So each time your a would be increased by 1, and then what we are doing is for each iteration of the loop, so each time your loop will run, your value of a will be incremented by 1, and you would get the output as, and you would get that value as the output, which we saw. So we saw 1 2 3 4, and we got saw till 99 and 100. So that's what your for loop does. If you understand a do while loop or a while loop, these statements would be written in a different style there, but the job is still the same. Here, for the point of view of focus and fast paced understanding, and we are just understanding what is really required when you do your apex code, and what would you would be doing in real life. So hence we are just understanding for loop, and we'll invest more time on understanding for loops and the enhanced for loops rather than understanding do and while loops, which you would never write really. I've not used while loop probably in like last 5 7 years. I've not used a while loop. I've always used a for loop. This is very important. Without a loop and without an if else condition, you can never write any code. Any business logic, you would have to loop, you'd have to use if else condition. So it is very, very important. So these two topics are extremely important: if else and for loops. So coming back here, any for loop would have a starting condition and an initial value. Then you would have an exit statement, and then you would have an increment. So you would increment your variable so that it ends up reaching this exit statement. So if we miss out the increment, then the value would always be zero, and again it would become an infinite loop. So it will keep on running and running because it will never reach the exit statement. So it is very important to that you give all of these three values: initial value, the exit value, and the increment. So these three things are extremely important. And then you can put whatever logic you want to put inside this block of statements of for loop. That's what for loop is. Let's look at what we were trying to understand from this screen. So as you can see on the presentation, I've also mentioned that it needs an initial statement, an exit condition, and an increment statement. And then you need to write a code block. You can write these values, write this value outside of the loop as well, but I would recommend that you write it like this, and understand that this is how you write a for loop, and that's how you should always be writing it. So always write it like this. It helps, and trust me, it is an easier way of writing code. Everybody who would read your code would understand it. A very nice, clean way of writing code. Coming back to this, so when executing this type for loop, Apex Runtime Engine performs following steps in the order. It executes the initial statement. It performs the exit condition check. If true, the loop continues. If false, the loop exits. For each time it executes the code block, then it executes the increment statement, and then it returns to step 2. So basically, it would step 1 will happen, then it will go to step 5, and then it will come back to step 2. Check if the condition is still true. If it is true, it will execute 3, 4, 5, go back to step 2, check condition is true, and it will keep on doing until the condition turns out to be false, and that's when it exits the loop and stops executing that code block. That's exactly what we saw here. It ran till 100 and then it stopped. So it is very, very important that you put the exit condition, the increment, and the initial value in your for loop. And it is very, very important to understand for loop and if and else if you are looking to become an Apex developer. Without if and else and without for loop, you cannot write any Apex code. So practice, 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 understand if and else, understand for loop. If you have any questions, reach out to me or thetrailmaker.com. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I'm happy to help. You can book a free session on thetrailmaker.com. Looking forward to speak with you. Best of journey in the Salesforce Ohana. See you, Trailblazer.